opposed to them, and I'm especially opposed after having served a couple of years and on the Commerce Committee under Mac McCracken. Mac is just, in my judgment, perhaps the very best chairperson of all the committees. He really runs an efficient ship. It's very fair. And when you lose that sort of experience, while no one is irreplaceable, it's going to be some big shoes to fill. So I think you lose experience when you have these term limits. And incidentally, we have them. They're called elections every 2 years.
Shade on the ballot. I do have sample ballots if any of you would like to see them. And unlike my opposition, I would vote no on the repeal of term limits. I support term limits. I say Matt McCracken's article was well written, but I do disagree. I support term limits, not only here, but I would support them on a national level.
First of all, regarding Senator McCracken, size 12. Still big shoes. Secondly, I was glad to find out that South Dakota's fourth in wind energy. You know, there's 4 or 5 of us missing here. If we were all here, we could move up to third or second in that. When we voted on term limits, however many years ago, I voted against them, thinking that the best term limits are the voters going to the polls and voting people out of office. Like Senator Napoli, I think I've changed my mind. I think term limits are all right. I say that having not served in Pierre. I understand that there's a certain history that can be learned by having experience in Pierre. But I also think we have a citizens' legislature, and that the writers of our Constitution in this state intended that we have a citizen legislature. And to me, term limits sort of help to fulfill that promise that was made when we entered into this Constitution many years ago.
What Craig said, I wrote a warm piece for the Journal several months ago, strongly in favor of term limits. And it's for that very reason. The concept of going to serve and then coming back to the community, that's the way it was intended originally. That's the way it should remain. The presumption of those who are in favor of are against term limits, that have people serve an unlimited amount of time, is that there are only a handful of people in this state who are qualified, either through experience or whatnot, to represent us. And I just think that's totally false. It's a totally wrong presumption. I presume that there are hundreds and thousands of people in this state who can serve us well as elected officials. And the more of those people who get involved, and the more of those people who are elected, they touch different circles. My circle may be different than Ed's circle, but you have more people that feel involved in the process and feel some ownership in the process through someone they're related to or someone they know. So I think term limits are absolutely a good thing. And the examples of the Matt McCrackens, I can give you examples, but won't, of those who've been there a long time, because we didn't have term limits. So that's a wash in my mind. And I think the presumption of the quality of South Dakotans and the number of South Dakotans who can serve in that capacity is much stronger than the opposite presumption. Thank you.
The public voted on this issue and actually put it into effect, so I support it. And I think that we can keep in mind that if an individual wants to change houses or to the Senate to the House, you can do so very readily within the whole framework. So, in other words, even though I served 3 terms in the House, I could have, by choice, run for the Senate this time and continued on with it. I think that it's an option that the candidates still have, but we certainly need to rotate and get new people involved in government, and you still are able to maintain the continuity with individuals that do choose to change chambers.
Is the fact that with term limits, the legislators are weakened in their position as against the executive branch. And that's a big disadvantage. And not having been there, some of you, I don't think you realize that. But you don't know what powers the governor has and how he can change things in his favor if you haven't been there. And in the South Dakota House in this coming year, there's going to be more newcomers than oldcomers, and that's going to be a disadvantage.
But actually the prime sponsor of the proposed bill over on the House side. And I think the only reason I got on it, I could care less whether South Dakota has term limits or not, personally, and I'll tell you why. Because we really don't have term limits. We have 8 years in the House, 8 years in the Senate, 8 years in the House, 8 years in the Senate, 8 years in the House, and it goes on and on and on and on. And I finally get to disagree with Representative Lust on something where I feel like I have a little background. The research shows that in 1992, this term limit wave went across the nation, or it was the early 1990s. And they tried to get as many states to get term limits as possible to limit the federal legislators, if you will, from sitting up in Washington, fat cats, making a lot of money, not representing people and rotating them up. And there's probably some good argument for that. In the state of South Dakota, we're not fat cats. We don't make a lot of money up there. I don't know if anybody's told you that. And the other thing is that we just don't sit around. I mean, we are a citizen-based legislature. So that's what brought term limits to us in the first place. Out of the 21 states that enacted, and I might be off by 1 or 2 numbers, so don't hold me to it, but out of the 21 or 22 states that enacted it, there's only about 14 left. The other ones have been challenged either through the Supreme Court or reversed by voters. So we're one of those select few states that have decided that our electorate doesn't decide, but a simple rule or a law decides when we should be in or out. Not to mention the fact, it hurts our leadership ability in the individual houses. Not overall, but in the individual houses. So, having said that, I'll let somebody else comment.
I won't echo everything of what Mr. Lutz said, but I will add one thing. The big criteria difference between the term limits is permanency. The Supreme Court ruled, the consensus of it was, if there's a permanency on term limits, that's unconstitutional. Like they said, you can go back and forth to the House, to the Senate. And one last thing is, there's, Bob has mentioned, there's plenty of qualified applicants to run for office to represent the people in their district. There's nothing wrong with new ideas. I would, personally myself, would like to see younger adults. I've seen a lot of them that I visited with in the District 35. That would be very good, very knowledgeable tech students from the School of Mines that would be very appropriate to run for office. They've got new ideas, they've got fresh ideas. This is their era. This is their time coming. They have, what we're leaving behind is what they have to fix. So leaving that aside, it's a constitutional issue, whether it's on term limits, it's permanent, that's unconstitutional. And I agree with that totally. However, we can flip back from House to Senate.
I have to say I really struggle with this issue. I really do. I think that in an ideal situation, in an ideal democracy, that our elections that we have each, 2 years or 4 years would take care of any of the problems that we have, and those are our term limits, like Senator Dakota says. But that doesn't always happen. It just doesn't. And we do sometimes get the same people that get elected time and time again because the people re-elect them time and time again. And the majority is not always right. The majority sometimes elects bad people over and over again. But the point that I would make, South Dakota ranks last in the nation for the number of women who hold public offices. And in states that have term limits, since 2002, the number of women who hold public offices have declined. So for that reason alone, I look up here at this table, and I see a lot of really great women who are qualified, who are wonderful. And how sad would it be if a number of us, and I hope a number of us do, get into office, and we do a great job, and we're term limited out. I think that's really sad, because we're already last in the nation. We need more women. We need more powerful women and qualified women in there. Thanks.
That was one of the driving factors that they sold term limits on, is to get more women into the state legislatures and the federal level. And it didn't happen. It didn't happen. It actually is working in reverse. Well, let me